And so we saw a quadrupling of the number of consumers who are willing to buy digitally. And we sort of thought like this was the new paradigm. However, what we found was as soon as the markets reopened and we went back to, that normal lifestyle before, we went right back to the same old buying pattern. So I think a good takeaway from this, particularly in a mature industry with a lot of established practices, is that it's not just about the technology and establishing the processes once and hoping that it catches on and retains. It's an active process that requires constant reinforcement to get it right.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, a podcast about leading with digital to win in the marketplace. I'm your host, Rissa Reddan, partner and chief marketing officer at West Monroe. On This is Digital, we talk to experts about how to go about not just doing digital, but being digital. At its core, digital is a connected mindset and way of working across all aspects of your business. Today, I am excited to introduce Tyson Jominy, Vice President, Data and Analytics, JD Power, and West Monroe's own Sam Uyeno, who is a partner in our energy and utilities practice. Welcome to the show, Tyson and Sam.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
Tyson and Sam join us to talk about EVs and the ecosystem that powers EVs. I had an aha moment back in the summer of 2021. I was on the phone with a sales rep from a solar provider company, and the question that was asked of me was, one, did I own an EV? And two, did I plan to purchase an EV in the next few years? Because both of those questions would inform the number of solar panels that I would need on my roof. And that was a real aha moment for me that EVs can't exist without the ecosystem that powers them. And there's this interesting relationship between these different pieces and parts of the ecosystem. And I'm excited to dive into that topic on today's podcast. Tyson and Sam, I'd love to hear more about your backgrounds and your professional journeys. Tyson, could we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Rissa. I'm, as stated, the Vice President of Data and Analytics at JD Power. I've had a very analytical career. I started in finance and accounting, doing cost control with Ford Motor Company. So I've been mostly in the auto industry. But since I got my MBA, a number of increasingly data-driven roles that I find myself in now. So I work with data. I mean, everyone knows the name JD Power. I mean, it's a very recognizable marketing brand. However, that's the market research side of the house. I'm on the other side. I'm on the data side of the house. Whereas market research asks consumers for their voice about what they think about the products and services that they have. What we do on the data side is we actually get the voice of something else. We get the voice of their wallets and how they voted at the car dealership with their hard-earned income. And so I like to bring that data, that level of insight, a very granular view of what's going on in the marketplace to clients, to automakers, suppliers, and the capital markets groups as well.
And Tyson, if I could just add too, I mean, you received your MBA at the same institution where I did, which was University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And there's a heavy emphasis on data and analytics with that particular program. Were you already interested in data and analytics before seeking out an MBA at Booth, or did Booth turn you into the data expert that you are today?
Well, I don't want to date myself and say how old I really am, Rissa, but when I got my MBA, data was still in its infancy. I mean, even when I joined JD Power a few years later, the idea of a data science, a data practice was still really developing. And so I went to Booth to get an MBA in finance and accounting. I thought I wanted to be in investment banking and continue on that track. But I've always been analytical, and I love cars. And so I was always looking, how do I blend these two together? And it turns out that the data and analytics space was calling my name. And I didn't even know it for all those years.
The perfect intersection right there with JD Power. Sam, could you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey?
Yeah, sure. I started my journey in the Navy working on a nuclear submarine as a submarine officer. And then when I got out of the service, I went to work for an electric utility, a very progressive one here in the Southern California area. I worked in transmission and distribution, finance and regulatory, all things that I think are very fit to support a lot of electrification that we're going through now. I've been at West Monroe for about 8 years now, and a lot of what I support is grid modernization in support of all the deep decarbonization that utilities are trying to drive, commensurate with legislation and regulatory goals. And one particular area that I've been focused on as of late is electrification of the transportation sector, seen as it emits so much GHG. And a lot of what we're focusing in that space is helping utilities design EV programs, help to strategize win-win programs that support customers and the utility, but then also planning a grid that can support all of this electrification. These are very large loads. They require a lot of upgrades. And how do we do it in a manner that's fit with the utility's goals of providing safe, clean, reliable energy at an affordable rate?
And Sam, you mentioned GHG. For anybody who might not know what GHG is, could you explain that for us?
Yeah, sure. Greenhouse gas emissions, it's a lot of what comes out of our tailpipes in the current internal combustion engine vehicles that we have. And some of the challenges creates is it depletes our ozone and creates some harmful effects that warm our climate.
Tyson, this morning I saw an infographic from JD Power, and it was an EV retail share forecast, which indicates that EVs will be 70% of sales by 2035. Could you give us a little bit of the story behind the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly optimistic for EVs at JD Power in general. But what we see is that EVs tend to do a lot of things particularly well. I mean, an internal combustion car gets you to your job. It takes you on family vacations. But EVs really turn a lot of the historical narrative on its ear. Because they can do so many other things that internal combustion engines can't. And primarily, if you're a buyer and you're interested in the total cost of ownership, EVs tend to have a lower total cost of ownership over time. So it's good for your wallet. If you're a buyer that's concerned about the environment, about GHG, about other elements, they are, in theory, better for the environment over time. And at the same time, if you're into performance, if you're into what makes cars fun, well, EVs have that power, the torque that you really feel in your butt of your seat as you're sitting there and you take off. So there's so many different things that EVs do. But at the same time, I mean, there are government mandates and the policy of both the United States as well as Europe, China, other places is to reduce carbon emissions, to reduce the greenhouse gases that we're seeing to leave the planet better. And so we see EVs as a way to do that. And so the amount of the sales of EVs in the US have been rising rapidly. Right now, we're seeing them about 8.5% of retail sales. So a very rapid rise here from very low single digits just prior to COVID. So it's an exciting future. The real question is, do we get to 100% naturally, or will it take regulation to get there? What is that peak going to be? But for now, it seems like they're going to be growing, nonstop.
Well, and I would love, Sam, if you have a perspective on that. What will it take to get to 100% EVs?
A lot of my focus is on the infrastructure side, just because utilities are typically clients that I serve. The infrastructure has to be there. It has to be reliable. It has to be ubiquitous. It has to be something that customers can trust and supports their preferences and their daily lives, not just consumers, but businesses too.
And is there work to be done to be ready for that percentage that we were just talking about? And is it a scramble? What are your thoughts on getting to a place of readiness to accommodate that percentage of EVs?
I think there's a lot of capabilities. There's a lot of digital capabilities that are going to be needed to get ready. A lot of utilities are concerned with the planning aspect of EVs, but then also the operational aspect. I mean, not just the adoption, but when it comes to planning, how can they forecast EV adoption from consumers and businesses across their network topology? So the entire grid, this expansive network of transmission, distribution, and substation facilities. So how can they forecast it and forecast it on that topology? That's a digital capability that we're only starting to see in the market in these last several years in a meaningful way. So those planning capabilities, I think, are going to help figure out where does the infrastructure need to show up, when, and in the most efficient manner. But then the other side of the coin is, how do you manage the loads? If the infrastructure is there, how are we managing the charging of all these different EVs for consumers and businesses all over the grid in different places, different times, and different habits, and quite honestly, changing operations so that we don't have to overbuild a lot of infrastructure that would be too expensive to afford?
That's an interesting point, Sam, because almost like, sort of just in time, if you think about just in time inventory, what's the analog then for the grid that you want to build just enough? You don't necessarily want to build too much or too few, but how do you find that Goldilocks space?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think this advanced planning is so important, because if you don't have that advanced planning and you start building out infrastructure and it's sized for peaks and it's supposed to be reliable, it's going to be very costly.
Are you interested in AI but not sure how to apply it to your business? You are in luck. Our AI experts at West Monroe are launching a new video podcast called This is AI. It won't be like anything else you've seen or heard. Instead of just talking about AI, our experts will show you real examples of how to apply AI to your business. It will launch September 30th, and you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. That makes total sense. And how do you think, what are the inputs to that? What are the data sources that you're employing? And it does make me wonder, Tyson, if, depending on the data that you all have, is there an opportunity because you've got perhaps geo information that would be relevant for an energy and utilities business in a given geography that, could that be an input to the planning, Sam, that you were talking about?
Oh yeah, exactly. What we're seeing is that EV share is very concentrated. It's not groundbreaking to say EV sell on California. Everyone kind of knows that intuitively. But when you actually see the numbers, the top 10 markets on the gasoline side account for about a third of all sales. But on the EV side, it's 50% of all sales are just in the top 10 markets. And when you look at who those top 10 are, we see the 4S cities kind of sneak into the top 10: San Francisco, San Diego, Sacramento, and Seattle. Those are not normally top 10 markets. So it's a different composition, but it's much more concentrated in these markets on the West Coast that are perhaps smaller for gas cars. So from an auto industry, they have a slightly less importance. They're top 25 markets, but on the EV side, they're top 10. And so it's a much different buyer demographic for these vehicles. And so when we're talking about infrastructure, it may not require us to do coast to coast infrastructure upgrades immediately, but there certainly are areas where they're highly needed. And I would ask Sam, EVs, we talk about them so much about the challenges they're going to place on the grid, but also what we're seeing is that EVs can serve as personal home utility stations. They can take power out and they can also put power back in. So is that factoring into the planning as well?
Oh, undoubtedly, Tyson. Just to put some context on that, here in California, to achieve some of the aggressive goals, especially that 2035 executive order, there is some advanced planning that's been done by one of our own California startups that estimates that if electric vehicles were to proliferate unmitigated, in other words, we wouldn't have these managed charging strategies, it would cost probably north of $50 billion to achieve that 2035 goal. But that doesn't account for much by way of managed charging strategies, which is where I think you're getting at. And it goes well beyond just being able to, say, discharge from a vehicle onto the grid or discharge from a vehicle onto a building. It could be more simple things and more achievable things in the short run of perhaps throttling the charging rate of various charging infrastructure scattered all over the grid in such a way that the person charging their vehicle isn't the wiser that their rate had been throttled down, but in aggregate and as a virtual power plant could provide an incredible amount of benefit for the utility. So that's why I was saying beyond planning, utilities are really concerned with how to manage the charging and orchestrate the charging of all these stations on the grid so that we don't have to overbuild, and so that even the vehicle owners themselves or the charging infrastructure owners, they also play a role in operating the grid and they're compensated for it.
Sam, you had mentioned the importance of charging strategy, and I'm curious to get perspective from you both on some announcements that have taken place this summer around Tesla emerging as the charging standard. And what impact does that have, both, Tyson, from your perspective on the auto production or auto sales, but then I'm curious, Sam, how that factors into what you're thinking about with load planning or planning more generally for energy and utilities businesses. Tyson, you want to go first?
Yeah, the industry was really crying out for one standard charger. Prior to that, we had a previous standard that kind of came and went really fast. It's since been replaced by one that's more common to vehicles that aren't Teslas. But Tesla had the NACS, the North American Charging Standard. Given Tesla's very far head start and lead in the charging network, the supercharger network that they have. It only made sense for the industry to conform around one standard, and that's part of the challenge of EVs. When we talk to consumers, they tend to focus on the greatest need that their vehicle will have, and for most consumers, that's the family road trip, right? The summer road trip, and load up the kids and go to the golf, or dare I even say, the weekend trip from Los Angeles and driving to Vegas. Who doesn't want to go to Vegas for the weekend? And so a lot of consumers are really concerned about that long distance travel. And Tesla really had that problem solved for many years. In fact, close to a decade. And the rest of the industry was struggling with a third-party solution, which had a lot of different companies trying to fill that gap. Moving to this one standard will provide the backbone that the industry really needed for the infrastructure. And so once you have the Tesla supercharging network open to everybody, now it makes sense for your Fords and your Toyotas and Hondas to start investing in various pieces of the infrastructure where their customers are, and to build onto sort of that backbone existing structure of the Tesla supercharger network, and now add pieces where it makes sense strategically, as opposed to looking at the entire map and going, how can we afford this?
Sam, what would you add to that? I mean, do you agree with Tyson's points around the importance of the move to the Tesla charging software standard, or what are the implications of the standard for energy and utilities companies?
The standardization is very helpful. I mean, range anxiety is such a big challenge with supporting adoption, and converging on a standard starts opening up so much more network to consumers. So if you think about GM's move to start using the Tesla connector, that really helps open a very large network for GM vehicles and probably some others down the road. So I think it really supports range anxiety. But something specifically that it does for utilities, aside from getting more EVs on the road, is a lot of that usage data, the charging data, the session data that is needed for planning and managed charging strategies and managed charging, say, monitoring and control capabilities, also becomes a bit standardized and easier to deal with. Because right now, I mean, there must be, well over 30 or 40 different EV network service providers, and each of them have their own way of structuring data, of transferring data, some less mature than others. And it makes it challenging for utilities to get their hands on it and study it and start making more meaningful programs, more meaningful infrastructure decisions, as well as managed charging strategies.
Tyson, based on our conversation so far, is it fair to say that EVs are digital products?
I would say they are supposed to be. They should be digital products. They want to be. It's sort of like, Michelangelo carving out the David statue from within the clay, or within the marble. Is always there. We have to bring it out. We mentioned Tesla a lot. I would like to find examples that don't start with Tesla, but in this case, they do. Tesla has really proven that EVs are very digital products, because it's not just about the technology. We know at West Monroe, the definition of digital extends far beyond the technology itself to include the way of thinking and have it embedded in your processes. And we really see that with how Tesla brought their EVs to market. Just something as common now as OTA, over-the-air updates for their vehicles, it was so groundbreaking. And when you talk about, you wake up in the morning and your vehicle will have updated overnight, and you could potentially have more range, more capabilities, more speed, more features that you didn't have yesterday. So your vehicle is constantly evolving. As Sam mentioned earlier, the vehicles are providing feedback to automakers, to the grid. They're talking back. So they tend to be much more digitally native products than anything we've done. However, we have to be able to listen. We're going to have to figure out how to sift out the noise that they produce from the true insights. But as of now, I mean, just the amount of capability they have unlocked. They are digital products. They just need sometimes to be brought out of their shells.
Well, Tyson, I have a couple follow-up questions for you based on that. That, when you think about the depreciation, I mean, there's a lot around, you drive the car off of the lot and it already starts to depreciate. And there are certainly many old saws about that. But is it possible that EVs will appreciate because they continue to receive updates, or they continue to improve performance over time?
I would like to be that optimistic. I want to be optimistic, but I don't think that they will appreciate in that sense. It was talked about at one point that Teslas would appreciate. And we've been in this strange period in the auto industry where we actually have seen vehicle values rising, but that's because of market dynamics. In general, though, what we probably will see is avoided depreciation. Vehicles will still come down. I mean, tires wear out, seats start to get scuffed and dirty, and scratches form on the vehicle. So they're not going to be perfect. A new vehicle will always be better than a used one. However, to your point, Rissa, the vehicles will improve over time. And so what we will see is that, perhaps instead of falling as far as an ICE vehicle, EVs will perhaps avoid some of the depreciation. And of course, the batteries, as they depreciate, we make so much of an emphasis here. I hear it a lot in the media. Once EV batteries are depleted, you have these, big hulking batteries, rotting in landfills and destroying the environment. The reality, though, is that a depleted battery from an automotive perspective has tremendous value for the infrastructure, for the grid, for buildings. And those cells can be repurposed. They're so valuable that we will not let them go to a landfill. We will use those to augment other parts of the infrastructure that's needed. So say it will help somewhat with depreciation, but I would like to say appreciation, but I can't do that.
Got it. And then my second follow-up question is related to data and how you think about the value of the data that is produced. And you'd made a comment earlier about, separating sort of the signal from the noise with EVs. I'm curious, what data do you find valuable and how do you value that data?
I mean, certainly where and how, when consumers are charging is extraordinarily valuable. I mean, what we have found, what consumers tell us, is that far greater than 80% of their charging, close to 90%, is done at home. And so what we know is those with driveways, which tend to be, those with the highest income levels, are the ones that are getting EVs today. And so EVs that are priced high are doing well because they're sold to consumers with driveways. But of course, what we need to understand now is, what do the driveway-less consumers do? How are they going to charge? When and where do those chargers need to be? And the data that we're getting from EVs will help to solve some of those geographic placement issues, as well as the demand issues for utilities.
Well, that feels to like it plays in a bit to the narrative around EVs being elitist, that, have they gotten their start with an affluent segment, but yet we're seeing a greater proliferation or greater adoption across various income levels. Is that fair to say?
Well, they're expensive vehicles. The batteries, the technology, the development, it's all new. Most EVs are a clean sheet design, a brand new platform produced in a greenfield facility. That's the first time, you go out to basically an empty field and you build a new facility to assemble the vehicle by a new workforce. And so there's so much new about them that makes them very expensive. So they're starting high and they're coming down. I wouldn't say that they're elitist to that extent. They require driveways. If you live in an apartment or you don't have the ability to charge a vehicle at your home overnight or at work, it would be very hard right now with the current infrastructure to own an EV. They are not right for everyone. And so the goal, though, and a lot of the push in the industry is to get down below 30,000 transaction price with EVs. There's a much greater market below 30,000 than there is at 55,000, which is where EVs tend to be today. So the industry will continue to push down and bring this technology down. I mean, Rissa, we tried in the beginning to have really cheap EVs. We took the subcompact hatchbacks that were out there and we stuffed in the biggest battery that we thought we could afford mixed with range. And we produced these vehicles in the beginning that had 80, 100 miles range. They were cheap, but consumers didn't want them and they didn't sell. So now the industry has kind of gone the other way, which is Tesla's way: start high and come low.
Sam, as you think about your clients and working with them to tackle what is a very big topic with, grid modernization, what are the topics that come up in your conversations? What is keeping your clients up at night right now as it relates to enabling EVs and enabling a cleaner, modern grid system?
Some of the things that a lot of my clients are focused on are what type of EVs are available that are suitable substitutes for different consumers and businesses. Like one area we do a lot of work on is fleets. The fleet electrification is typically a more challenging problem statement than the individual consumer. There's a lot of other complexities. So knowing what type of EVs are available and suitable substitutes, not only today, but what's being planned in the future is definitely really important. But also just customer preferences. Whether you're a consumer or a business, you're going to have a certain operation in how you use that vehicle. And you're going to have some that's some that's preferences, and there's going to be some degree of discretion. The discretion is really important because we're trying to figure out where customers are flexible, and that plays into different managed charging strategies. Also, just the location of the chargers, like where are the chargers going to be? What kind of capacity do they have? Will they be available? Will they be reliable? Do they support all customers? Maybe another thing to think of is utilities through regulatory compact are what I kind of call the purveyors of equity. They don't get to pick and choose their customers. They have to support all customers in their territory. So figuring out ways of identifying incentives and rebates and things that bring down that cost of purchasing an EV, but also the education of helping them understand that over the useful life of that EV, they're likely to pay more than an internal combustion engine. And it's hard to understand that math without a little bit of help.
Well, I think that's fascinating, purveyors of equity, and that does create some unique challenges for the business at a very fundamental level. And it's an interesting one, when you think about the writing that's out there around the digital divide and what separates people and how can we help people become more digital. But often it comes back to how do you power that? And what's the infrastructure that needs to be in place in order to achieve that? That's really interesting. So if we look into our crystal balls for 2024, Sam, what do you see? What are the activities? What are the challenges? What are your predictions for the new year?
There's going to be huge emphasis in those two areas that I talked about, the advanced planning. So how do we get more granular with our data in planning for where EVs are likely to show up and how they're going to be used and charged? And then the flip side of that coin is you're probably going to see more progressive, active managed charging strategies. So in the past and today, we have a lot of passive managed charging strategies. These are things like generic time of use rates that can be used to incentivize people to charge when the cost of energy is lower, and then perhaps not charge or throttle the amount of charging when it's expensive. But there's going to be programs that are going to be a little bit more active in nature. We're going to be able to use communication signals and in some instances probably take direct control of some of these charging banks and ever so slightly throttle the amount of charging so that we could provide some relief on the grid and perhaps put some money into consumer and businesses' pockets for doing so.
Tyson, what about you? What do you foresee in 2024?
Well, first we need to get out of 23. These are actually, as optimistic as I am about EVs, these are probably some dark days for EVs. Inventory's building, and there's a very strong narrative out there right now that consumers don't want EVs.
Is that true?
I've been fighting it very aggressively in social media and in interviews. I don't think it's true at all because what we see is that EV share hit an all-time high in June and then nearly did it again in July. We'll see how August turns out. It's probably going to be pretty close to another record in August. Consumers want EVs, but they really want one kind of EV. They've been buying Teslas. Tesla still has about 2/3 a share of all EV sales. So it's the other EVs that are stacking up, the ones from the traditional automakers. And so the industry really needs to adapt and figure out how to sell these. EVs aren't going away. As you mentioned earlier, JD Power predicts very robust future demand for EVs. So it's going to continue to increase. And it's going to require a very big rethink. We've approached EVs with a very traditional mindset. So as we get into 24, I'm pushing the industry, and I hope to see the industry start to change some of its traditional go-to-market strategies. A big, for instance, is our marketing is still very much in the ICE world, the gasoline engine internal combustion world, which is that consumers in the north need all-wheel drive, and consumers in the south only need two-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. But what we see with EVs is often the highest powertrains, the top of the ladder trim is often tied to having dual motors, basically all-wheel drive. And so we're seeing a lot of automakers follow this old mindset of they don't want all-wheel drive vehicles in Southern California, but they need them in Seattle. Well, we tie range, we tie horsepower to the number of motors. And so what we're doing is we are sending higher performing vehicles with more range and more horsepower to Seattle, in some cases upwards of 80 miles of range more on average for one vehicle is sent to Seattle than it's sent to Southern California. So we need to really blow up that old mindset and start to use, listen to what the data is telling us and to start to update our go-to-market strategies. So I see a lot of that in 2024. The industry will still be very strong. So within this framework, we're going to have strong consumer demand still from pent-up demand from the COVID and supply chain days. That's going to carry the industry forward, get it through any potential recession or any slowdowns that could be out there, and really allow EVs to continue to mature and develop while the industry desperately needs to refine its marketing strategies.
And when you think about the need for change with go-to-market strategy, is it a case of what got us here won't get us there? That we're trying to manage through or market as we've done historically, but we're at a different place and it's a different set of circumstances and different customer expectations? I mean, what do you think is creating that situation, and how do we remedy it?
I mean, when you're a consumer buying a gasoline car, you go into a dealership, maybe the dealer will give you a discount, maybe the automaker will have some incentives. You bring some cash to the dealer or trade, and that's basically it. There's three parties in a transaction: the dealer, the automaker, and the consumer. When you buy an EV, now all of a sudden, there's federal government incentives, there's state and local incentives. There are far more players involved, not to mention the utilities have incentives. They have different rates. They can help install your vehicle. And so when you start to break down the transaction of an EV, there's 7 or 8 potential players in the room as opposed to 3. And the prices can be radically lower. I mean, in the state of Oregon, there's no sales tax, and the state will give you $4,000 off an EV, as opposed to a state like Tennessee, where they give you nothing and you're going to pay your 7% sales tax on the vehicle. You're talking about the same vehicle can be upwards of 15 or 20 percentage points cheaper in Oregon than it is in Tennessee or even California. And so the states, the utilities, the local governments, I mean, everyone kind of has a hand in the price of a vehicle and the cost of ownership of an EV. It's very different than what we've done for the past 125 years.
And with that, Tyson, who's responsible for helping the consumer through that? I mean, it sounds like an awful lot to manage or to understand or to get a sense of the implications of making different choices. Who's looking out for the consumer in this case?
You hit on a great issue, Rissa, is that it's a shared responsibility to educate the consumer and to make sure consumers are making the best choice. In California right now, when consumers have a suitable EV for their option, so if they have a gasoline vehicle, but an EV is a comparable price and capability, they break for the EV almost 50% of the time. So California is nearly a 50-50 market when there's a suitable competitor. But consumers in the rest of the nation don't operate that way. I mean, consumers in Texas and Louisiana and South Carolina, they're not naturally inclined toward electric vehicles. And so they're going to require the education. It needs to come from the automakers. It needs to come from players like JD Power. But the automakers have this retailer body, and one of the great strengths of retailers is that they amplify the message. And so we need to get the dealers on board with EVs. They're here. They're not going away. And by the way, if you help amplify this message, we're really going to start to drive it home and show consumers the potential value and savings they could have from owning these.
Sam, anything that you would add to that on sort of navigating this brave new world?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with Tyson. There's just a lot more interaction, a lot more stakeholders in making these decisions. I mean, rightfully so. It's a lot of it's new technology and kind of a new way of solving some of our challenges. I do think utilities also have a unique role in this area too, though, because they're not selling the EVs. They're not necessarily even selling the charging stations and a lot of the services that come with it. So they, in some respects, could be viewed as sort of that independent party that could help their consumers or their customers sift through all of this different information and a lot of sales literature and a lot of opportunities to reduce the price. It's also an area that we've been supporting utilities because we think it's so important. So one of the things we've been helping utilities with, not just consumers, but businesses, how do they look at their own unique business case for electrification? And how do they surface all of the incentives and rebates wherever they may come from at the federal, the state level, and even utility level to buy down that purchase? But then also look at what's the long run savings and ultimate savings they might enjoy if they were to adopt. I think utilities are in that unique position to provide that support.
Tyson and Sam, we've been talking a lot about the transformation of the automotive industry and also of the energy and utilities industry. And I'm curious, of all the learnings that have taken place with the introduction and adoption of EVs, what can other industries take away or learn from what's happened with the development and evolution of the EV ecosystem? Tyson?
I would say in the auto industry, first thing that comes to mind is during COVID, all retailers, automotive dealers had to put in place the digital resources to sell cars. At the biggest height of COVID back in spring summer 2020, markets like San Francisco that were 100% shut down. I mean, completely locked down. Auto sales in San Francisco were still about 30% of their normal run rate during that time, which means that 30% of normal buying patterns in the auto industry shifted to fully digital sales. And that was up from single digits, 7-8% was kind of the pre-COVID norm. And so we saw a quadrupling of the number of consumers who are willing to buy digitally. And we sort of thought like this was the new paradigm. However, what we found was as soon as the markets reopened and we went back to, that normal lifestyle before, we went right back to the same old buying pattern. So I think a good takeaway from this, particularly in a mature industry with a lot of established practices, is that it's not just about the technology and establishing the processes once and hoping that it catches on and retains. It's an active process that requires constant reinforcement to get it right. Dealers are incredible business people. If they can make more money doing it one way or the other, they're going to follow the money. And so if consumers were buying digitally, they weren't going into the dealership, they weren't getting more add-on products or services from the dealer. Therefore, the dealers wanted them to come back. I think it's a process that requires reinforcement from the industry and constant checking in with the data to see, is this working or is this not working? That feedback loop, certainly of profitability and consumer response is critical, but it takes constant reinforcement to keep something going, particularly such a big change like going from analog to digital.
Well, and Tyson, a quick follow-up question for you there. We talk a lot here at West Monroe about the intersection of the digital experience with the physical experience, which I think is an interesting one when you think about dealers, that there is a hard good or there is something that you want to touch and feel. But, how do you think about that intersection of digital? That it sounds like the pendulum has really swung over to digital, but then it might be coming back more to physical. Are we going to end at a happy medium, or where will that pendulum land?
Well, I mean, one thing we've seen with the startups, companies like Rivian, Tesla, and others, they do have a much more digital experience. You can go onto Tesla's website right now and purchase a vehicle in a matter of seconds. You could come home late one night from hanging out with friends, and before you know it, you've already bought a car online if you're just hanging out there. They make it so easy to transact there with their website. So it is a different experience than going in and kicking the tires. I mean, the industry feels like you have to have that sort of visceral, touching, smelling, experiencing the car feel. But I think some of these new startups have shown us that, if the cars are consistent and the options are fairly limited, you don't have to get in and understand all the trim and option packages and how one vehicle walks from another. If you keep the choices simplified, you can move consumers that way and makes that visceral experience less onerous. The worst part about when we buy a car today is the hours it takes between when you say that's the one and when you get to drive it home and show it off to your family and neighbors. I mean, there's a couple hours between those points and they can be excruciating, as opposed to getting all the hard work done up front and just going to a dealership and getting that immediate payoff, that experience of touching the vehicle for the first. I mean, you'd be so excited to get in and go home right away. You'd be home in minutes, and the joy would be that much greater.
Thank you, Tyson. So, Sam, when you think about the transformation of the energy and utilities sector, and in part to accommodate EVs and this new way of driving and living, what are the things that you think are relevant? What are the learnings from energy and utilities that you're seeing that could be leveraged in other industries?
Maybe just our way of life is much different. The way we consume energy is just going to be very different. With these electric vehicles, you've got big loads that are moving all over and plugging into different parts of the grid. So there is this need to monitor and control the grid with so much more detail, so much more fidelity than we have in the past. And I think there's going to be other industries that are equally impacted by decentralization, and it requires monitoring and controlling in a much different manner.
And a follow-up question for you, Sam. I mean, I would suspect that with that comes different talent needs. That you've got different skills that are needed in order to navigate this new set of circumstances. Is that fair to say?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think maybe just starting on the understanding the customer itself is just really a different a different skill set. And while some utilities are better than others, I think it's a requisite for developing good quality programs, planning infrastructure, but then also orchestrating how these vehicles are managed on the grid. Because understanding those charging patterns and those customers and where there might be some discretion in their charging behavior is everything to the utility. So that customer-centric mindset and those skills that come along with it are just indispensable.
Well, we're going to go ahead and start to wrap up here. And I have to ask my question that I ask of all of our guests. This is something that we do like to ask everyone who joins us. What does digital mean to you? And Tyson, I'd love to start with you.
Well, I have my answer, and unfortunately, I front ran my own answer here so many times by saying it. So to me, digital is optimistic. And I hope none of your other guests have said that. I haven't heard it so far, but
No.
to me, it's optimistic. If digital is not just a technology; it is a mindset. It is a way of going to market, of improving. And if you're a business and you want to get better, you want to get the answers. You want to get ahead of the competition. The digital mindset is going to help these companies. It's going to help the auto companies improve the marketing and update the marketing for the new world of EVs. It's going to help the retailers, come from the practice of selling on site with a consumer in their dealership for hours, transforming that experience. And so I'm optimistic that when the digital mindset is applied, we'll get to better answers. We'll get there faster. We'll get more optimal solutions for consumers. We'll get a better solution for retailers as well as automakers. So for me, it means optimism.
Sam, how about you? What does digital mean to you?
Yeah, I love that. I don't have a simple definition, but I do think that mindset shift, Tyson, is definitely a big part of it. Connectedness, as you mentioned earlier, Rissa, is a very big part of it. And I think it's so important now because there's a lot of technology that's finally intersecting. I mean, we've had high-powered computers, we've got mobile devices that connect us, we have the internet, high-speed communications, Internet of Things everywhere, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. And when we properly deploy all these technologies in concert, they can dramatically improve businesses like Tyson was talking about. But maybe something to appreciate here is the ability to activate all of this technology to improve businesses. It requires a much different mindset. It requires us to move away from heuristic decision making and start demanding data to make decisions off them, to view things as products and not big bang projects that have to be updated, but rather they're iterated over time. I think a lot of that mindset shift is important so that you can deploy things in a digital manner. And just EVs, as Tyson was mentioning earlier, they are inherently digital. In fact, I can't think of anything more digital. It's a digital marvel. The fact that these cars can manage batteries and operations and regenerative braking and all the other things that they do, including how they integrate with the grid in nearly real time. They're digital marvels, and they'll continue to improve. There's no better application of digital.
Sam, for people that want to stay in touch or follow along with what you're up to, is there a social media platform of choice or a way that you would like people to follow you?
You can probably find me on LinkedIn, might be the best. And I'm probably one of the few Sam Uyenos that you'll find here in the US, if not maybe the only. Would love to connect with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. And Tyson, how about you? How would you like people to stay close to what you're up to?
That may be the hardest question of the whole time here, Rissa. I was a very avid Twitter user, and now I'm a refugee from Twitter, trying to find my new home and where I can set up shop. I am on Threads. I probably am doing more on LinkedIn these days, like Sam. So you can find me under my name. I promise you, there's not two Tyson Jominys on LinkedIn. So look for me there, and love to continue the dialogue.
Well, fantastic. What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Tyson and Sam, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.